Security blocked him from entering the hotel, not knowing he owned the entire chain. They told him he didn't belong there, not because he was drunk, not because he caused a scene, but because of the way he looked. Dusty boots, worn-out jeans, a beaten-up leather jacket that smelled of years on the road. He didn't drive up in a Rolls. He didn't wear a Rolex, so they assumed he was a nobody. The security guard blocked the door like he was guarding the crown jewels. "Sorry, sir. This entrance is for hotel guests only." The old man didn't argue, didn't even flinch. He just looked the boy dead in the eye and nodded. Then he reached for his phone, dialed one number. On the other end, someone answered immediately. "I'm here," the old man said. "Front entrance being held up." And that was it. What happened next? Shut down the entire lobby. The manager came sprinting. So did the regional director. Staff froze mid-conversation. Guests dropped their champagne flutes. Because the man they just humiliated owned the entire damn hotel chain, that's right. The old cowboy they dismissed like dirt was Clint Eastwood, the billionaire behind Eastwood Hospitality, 137 luxury hotels across the country. And he had just walked into this one unannounced. No entourage, no press, just him. And a quiet lesson the world seems to keep forgetting. Never judge a man by his clothes. Judge him by what he's built. Let me tell you exactly what happened that night. How a smug receptionist got humbled. How a young guard learned respect the hard way. And how one silent old man reminded everyone in that lobby what real power looks like. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about legacy. It's about the kind of man who doesn't need to speak loudly because his name echoes in every hallway. So sit down, because what Clint did next, you won't believe. Before we get deeper into this story, hit the like button if you believe respect should be earned, not assumed. Subscribe for more stories that remind the world what real men look like. As Clint stepped past the front door, his boots brushing against the polished marble floor, all eyes didn't turn to greet him. They turned to judge him. Behind the front desk stood a woman in her mid-30s, polished nails, hair pulled tight, designer heels. She wore her uniform like armor, rigid, self-important, untouchable. Her name tag read Karen, Guest Experience Manager. But her face said something else entirely. She didn't welcome him. She didn't smile. Instead, she gave him the look. That look older men know all too well. The look that says, "You're not supposed to be here." Clint didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone seemed to bother her. Her eyes scanned him from head to toe, lingering on the creases of his jacket, the dust on his boots. Then came the scoff, subtle, almost hidden, but it was there. She leaned over to the younger concierge and whispered something behind her hand. They both laughed. That smug, quiet kind of laughter you hear in high-end lobbies when someone beneath walks in. They thought he was just another lost rancher. A poor old man who wandered into the wrong building, a relic from a forgotten time. But the irony? Clint had built more in a decade than these people would in their entire lives. He didn't need to impress anyone, especially not someone who judged guests by their shoes. "Can I help you, sir?" Karen asked, dripping with condescension. Not curiosity, not kindness, just the fake hospitality of someone used to being in control. Clint met her gaze, calm, collected, not a flicker of anger. "I'm just here to speak with someone," he said. "And who might that be?" she replied, eyebrows raised. Her tone suggested she didn't believe he knew anyone worth speaking to. Clint paused for a moment, just long enough to let the silence become uncomfortable. "You'll see," she smirked. It wasn't the kind of smirk you give to someone dangerous. It was the kind you give to someone you think is beneath you. And that was her first mistake. The lobby wasn't full yet, but a few guests glanced over, sensing tension in the air. Karen waved her hand toward the guard, signaling him to keep an eye on the old man. It was clear. In her eyes, Clint Eastwood wasn't a guest. He was a problem. A problem she thought she could handle with a name tag and a fake smile. But Clint had dealt with real problems before. Wildfires, bankers, studio executives, even death threats. This was just another poorly trained gatekeeper in a world that had forgotten what real men look like. And Karen. She was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The security guard stepped forward again, his chest puffed out like he had something to prove. 20-something, buzz cut, earpiece, clipboard in hand. The kind of guy who thinks a tight polo and a walkie-talkie make him a warrior. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside," he said. Clint didn't move. He didn't blink. Just stood there, hands relaxed at his sides. Silent, heavy, solid as a stone. The kid raised his voice. "We have protocols. This area's for registered guests only, VIP clients. I can escort you to the side entrance if you're looking for accommodations more in your range." There it was, the assumption, the insult, delivered with the tone of a man who's never had to earn respect, just wear it like a costume. One of the bellboys snickered from behind the luggage cart. Another staff member rolled her eyes. Even a couple of guests nearby chuckled behind their wine glasses. Clint was one breath away from being laughed out of the building. By people who didn't know they were standing in a palace he had built. He could have said something, could have dropped his name, could have pulled rank, but he didn't. Because real power doesn't beg for recognition. It waits. He took a small step forward, just enough for the security guard to instinctively reach for his belt. The kid didn't draw a weapon, but his fingers hovered. Clint noticed, and for a second, everything froze. The clinking glasses, the elevator chime, the lobby music. Time stopped, because while the staff saw an old man causing trouble, Clint saw something else. He saw the state of the world, where men were judged by their wardrobe, where respect was handed to the loudest guy in the room, where youth mistook arrogance for strength. He'd fought wars quieter than this lobby. Still silent, he slowly reached into his jacket. The guard stiffened. The concierge tensed. Karen peeked from behind the desk, suddenly alert, but Clint didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a phone. The same phone he used to make deals worth millions, the same phone that built empires while other men chased titles. He dialed. 2 rings. "Yeah," he said. "It's me. They don't know I'm here. You might want to come down." He hung up. No explanation, no negotiation, just that voice, calm, steady, almost bored. The guard hesitated. Who exactly are you meeting?" Clint looked him dead in the eye. "You'll know soon enough." That was the last thing he said. And just like that, the power in the room shifted, not with noise, not with force, but with presence. Because when a man doesn't ask for respect and still gets it, that's when you know who he really is. The phone call lasted less than 10 seconds, but it hit harder than any speech, harder than any badge or any uniform in that building. Clint Eastwood didn't explain himself, didn't demand anything, he just spoke, like a man who knew that his presence was enough. And then he waited, not nervously, not impatiently, just stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders square, staring straight ahead, as if he already knew exactly what was about to happen. Because he did. He'd made that kind of call before, in boardrooms, on construction sites, at studio lots where nervous millionaires used to fumble over his name. He didn't need to raise his voice, he just needed to say, "I'm here," and the right people would move. Now in that hotel lobby, full of imported marble and overpriced perfume, Clint stood still, the kind of stillness that only men who've earned peace through war can master. Meanwhile, the staff started shifting. Karen leaned over her desk again, typing frantically, probably checking guest records. The concierge whispered something to the security guard. Even the bartender, polishing a glass behind the lounge bar, slowed his movements and started paying attention. They didn't know why, but something had changed. They could feel it. Clint wasn't fidgeting like someone out of place. He wasn't looking around for validation. He wasn't scanning the room like a lost tourist. He was waiting. And men like that don't wait for long. 3 minutes passed, then 4. The silence in the lobby grew heavier by the second. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. Even the music from the speakers seemed to fade. At exactly the 5th minute, the elevator dinged. The doors opened, and out stepped a man in a navy blue suit, no tie, shirt unbuttoned, just enough to show confidence without arrogance. It was Jonathan Hale, Regional Director of Eastwood Hospitality, a man whose face appeared in Forbes last year, a man who rarely showed up at ground level unless the building was literally on fire. But today, as he was here, walking fast, sweating, eyes scanning the room like he was hunting a ghost, then he saw Clint, and everything changed. His pace slowed, his posture dropped, and his expression went from confusion to fear to reverence. "Mr. Eastwood," he breathed. "Sir, I had no idea you were coming today." The entire lobby turned toward the sound of his voice. The security guard stepped back, confused. Karen froze behind the desk. Even the concierge's fake smile vanished. Because in that moment, the truth hit. That old man they almost threw out? He didn't just belong there. He owned the damn building. You could feel it before you could see it. The moment the regional director spoke Clint's name, the air in that lobby shifted. Not just the mood, the very temperature. Suddenly everyone stood a little straighter. No more smirks, no more whispers, no more assumptions. Jonathan Hale moved fast, almost jogged across the marble floor in his Italian leather shoes, like a man trying to erase the last 5 minutes of his staff's behavior. He extended his hand. Clint didn't take it. Not out of disrespect, but out of principle. A man like Clint doesn't forget. He doesn't explode, doesn't shout, he just remembers. And when the time is right, he acts. Hale cleared his throat. "Sir, I apologize for the confusion. We weren't aware you were coming in today." Clint looked around, not at Hale but at the staff, at the security guard now avoiding eye contact like a boy who'd broken a window, at Karen, standing frozen behind her podium, mouth slightly open, fingers still resting on the keyboard as if typing could somehow undo what just happened, at the guests now dead silent, their conversations cut short like someone pulled the plug on their confidence. Then Clint spoke. "I didn't come here for attention," he said. "Didn't announce myself. Didn't ask for red carpets or champagne." He paused, voice calm and steady. "I just walked in. That was all it took." The message wasn't loud, but it echoed in every corner of that room. The kind of message that doesn't need to be explained because it's felt. The regional director, visibly rattled, turned to the staff. "I want everyone to understand something," he said, raising his voice. "This man is not a guest. He's the reason this hotel exists. He built this chain from nothing. Every room, every salary, every plate of food you've served traces back to him. Now even the guests, the hedge fund guys, the tech bros, the influencers, started paying attention for real. Because they were witnessing something they'd never seen before. A man of quiet legacy walking into his empire without needing to prove a damn thing. The lobby that once treated him like dirt was now at full standstill. No one dared move. No one dared speak. All eyes were on Clint. And all he did was take one slow step forward. One step. And the weight of it collapsed the false power structures around him. Because when true ownership walks in, everything else shuts up. The silence in the lobby stretched like a tight wire. And then, Hale spoke again. "I think everyone here deserves to know exactly who this man is." He turned to face the room. The staff, the guests, even the bartenders had stopped working. "This is Mr. Clint Eastwood, founder and majority owner of Eastwood Hospitality Group." Gasps, murmurs. A woman at the bar dropped her phone. The concierge's jaw physically dropped. Karen, she looked like she'd seen a ghost wearing boots and a leather jacket. But Hale wasn't done. Eastwood Hospitality owns 137 luxury properties in 26 states. This hotel is his flagship. And everything you see here, every marble tile, every chandelier, every dollar you've earned in this building, exists because of his vision. You could hear hearts racing, pride, embarrassment, awe. Everyone suddenly became very aware of what they were wearing, how they were standing, what they had just said. And Clint still hadn't smiled, still hadn't puffed his chest, still hadn't said, "Told you so," because he didn't have to. Real power isn't noisy. It doesn't come with a spotlight or a stage. It walks in with dusty boots and leaves a trail of silence behind it. Karen took a step forward, her hands shaking slightly. "Mr. Eastwood, I had no idea. I'm so sorry if we—" He raised one hand. She stopped. That single gesture carried more weight than 1,000 words. Because some men don't correct you with insults. They correct you with restraint. The young security guard? He looked like he wanted to crawl under the carpet. His arms were stiff at his sides, face flushed red with shame. Hale looked at him, then back at Clint. "Would you like me to Take any action, sir. Clint turned his head slowly, met the boy's eyes, and held the stare. Teach him, Clint said. Don't fire him. Teach him, or you'll just replace one fool with another. That was the moment everyone finally understood what kind of man they were dealing with. Not just a billionaire, not just a hotel tycoon, but a builder, a leader, a man who earned respect because he never stopped giving it, even to those who didn't deserve it. The weight in the room shifted once more. Now it wasn't fear. It was respect, deep, unshakable. Earned because Clint Eastwood didn't need anyone to remember his name. He just needed them to remember the lesson. The security guard looked like a man waiting for a sentence. His hands were behind his back, his eyes on the floor. But Clint didn't speak right away. He just stared at the kid, not with hatred, but with clarity. The kind of look a man gives when he's seen war, when he's buried friends, when he's watched people rise and fall, not because of money, but because of character. He took one slow step forward, then another, until they stood face to face. The young man straightened his spine like it might save him, but there was no uniform that could protect him now. You remember what you said to me? Clint asked. The boy swallowed hard. Yes, sir. You said this entrance was for important guests. Yes, sir. Clint nodded slowly. And what made you think I wasn't one? No answer, because there wasn't one. He let the silence linger. A full 5 seconds. 5 long echoing seconds in that grand marble lobby. Then Clint leaned in just enough, not threatening, not cruel, just focused. Let me teach you something, he said. You can't measure a man's worth by the shine on his shoes, or the car he drives, or the card in his wallet. The guard said nothing. You measure a man, Clint continued, by what he's survived, by how he treats others when nobody's watching, by whether he shows up quietly and still carries weight. He took a breath. You looked at me and saw nothing. That's not your fault. You've been trained by a world that praises noise and ignores wisdom. Another pause. Longer this time. But if you want to last in this business, or any business, learn to spot real power when it's quiet. Then Clint did something no one expected. He put a hand on the kid's shoulder. You're young. You'll get smarter if someone gives you the chance. The guard looked like he was about to cry. Not from fear, from shame. Hale stepped in, unsure. Would you like us to move him to another position, sir? Clint shook his head. No. Keep him right here. He needs to stand at this door every day and remember what just happened. Then he looked over his shoulder at Karen, who hadn't moved an inch. And she? Clint's tone sharpened just slightly. She's in the wrong job. You don't put someone at the front line who judges more than she listens. Karen lowered her head. And with that, Clint turned away. Not in anger. In finality, because sometimes the best revenge is letting someone live with what they've done. And in that lobby, with eyes on him from every direction, Clint walked past the velvet ropes, past the golden elevators, and into the suite he had built with calloused hands and quiet pride. When Clint turned his back to the staff, not a single person in that lobby breathed too loudly. No clapping, no camera phones, no fake apologies echoing through the air. Just silence. Real silence. The kind that weighs on your chest like concrete. The kind of silence you only hear in churches or funerals, or when a real man walks out of a room. The elevator bell dinged. Clint stepped in. No one followed. Not Hale. Not the bellboy. Not even the concierge who just 15 minutes earlier had mocked him under his breath. The doors closed, and when they did, it was like the oxygen had been sucked out of the building. Karen stood still behind the front desk, her fingers frozen on the keyboard, screen blinking back at her. Useless now. The guard remained by the entrance, eyes locked on the floor, as if replaying every moment, every word, every breath since the old man walked in. Across the lobby, a couple dressed in high fashion whispered to each other. The man shook his head. The woman nodded slowly. Even they knew. They just witnessed something rare. No scandal. No shouting. Just correction. A quiet correction delivered by presence alone. That's the thing about respect. When it's real, it doesn't have to be announced. It doesn't demand applause. It commands silence. And that silence spread like wildfire. The bellboy quietly straightened the luggage rack. The bartender put down his rag. The housekeeper who'd stepped into the hallway slowly backed away. It wasn't fear. It was recalibration. The realization that, for years, they had mistaken polish for power. That they'd looked up to men in suits who talked too loud and tipped too little. That they had forgotten what real strength looked like. Now they remembered. Clint Eastwood didn't raise his voice. He didn't flash his bank account. He didn't humiliate anyone with threats or titles, but he left the entire room in checkmate, without ever moving a pawn. Hale finally broke the silence, speaking to no one in particular. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "Next time, show respect before you find out who's watching." And with that he turned and walked back toward his office. No swagger, no speech, just the quiet pace of a man who'd just been reminded that legacy walks softly but leaves deep footprints. And in that hotel lobby the silence remained. The penthouse suite was quiet. No assistants, no phone calls, no champagne waiting on ice. Just Clint. And the kind of silence a man earns after a long life of making hard decisions. He walked across the hardwood floor slowly. Not because he was tired, because he was thinking. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Los Angeles glittered, a city drunk on noise. A skyline built by men like him, now run by people who've never held a hammer. He poured himself a glass of bourbon, neat, 2 fingers, sat down by the window and stared out. There was no satisfaction on his face, no smug grin, no "I told you so" dancing in his eyes. Just that same weathered expression. The look of a man who's seen empires rise and fall, not on TV, but in real life. He took a sip. In the quiet of that room, his thoughts drifted, not to the receptionist or the security guard or even the manager, but to something deeper. When did respect become optional? When did we start confusing flash for value? When did a man's worth get tied to how much noise he could make? He thought of his father, a mechanic, worked with his hands, never had more than a week's vacation in his life. But when he walked into a room, people stood up, not because he was rich, but because he was solid. Clint had spent his whole life trying to be that kind of man. Built hotels not for clout, but for legacy, not to impress, but to provide. And now he walks into his own building and a kid with a Bluetooth headset thinks he's in the way. He chuckled, just once, a dry, knowing laugh. Then he spoke, not to anyone, just to himself. "They'll learn, one way or another." He took another sip. Because men like Clint don't seek revenge, they offer correction, and then they leave the rest to time. He didn't need applause, didn't need headlines, didn't need that receptionist to grovel or that security guard to cry. All he needed was to walk in like a man and walk out the same way. The next morning came quiet and clean. The hotel lobby looked the same, polished floors, soft music, perfect smiles, but something had changed, not in the decor, not in the lighting, in the tone. The security guard was back at his post, same uniform, same stance. But this time his eyes were sharper, his posture firmer. And when an older man walked in, jeans, cowboy hat, sun-wrinkled skin, the guard didn't flinch. He opened the door without hesitation, held it wide, and nodded. "Good morning, sir. Welcome in." The older man gave him a small smile. "Thanks, son." No one else noticed. No music stopped. No manager came running. No whispers or murmurs. But up on the top floor, Clint Eastwood stood by the window, sipping coffee, watching. Not judging, not gloating, just making sure the lesson stuck. And it had. Because real change doesn't need fanfare. It needs example. It needs repetition. And sometimes, it just needs one man brave enough to walk through a door no one's holding open for him. Clint turned from the glass. He had meetings to get to, contracts to review, buildings to inspect. But none of that mattered as much as what he saw just now. A young man learning to show respect, not for power, but for presence. Not for a name, but for a man. He walked across the suite slowly, boots echoing on hardwood, same pace, same weight. Because Clint Eastwood doesn't walk fast, he walks right. And when the door closed behind him, the world kept spinning. A little quieter, a little wiser. If stories like this mean something to you, if you believe respect still matters, even in a world that's forgotten what it looks like, then don't just scroll away. hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, have you ever been underestimated and proven everyone wrong? We read every single story. Because this channel isn't just about entertainment, it's about reminding people what real dignity looks like. We'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.